I am live. I'm reading Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth. I've read this before over a decade ago, and I've read it before more recently, but I've never uploaded it on my BitChute. Yes, I did, but I didn't do it on my new YouTube. That's why I'm doing it again. Today is the 27th of February 2025, and this book is about a prelude to the landing on planet Earth, guided by extraterrestrials, whose spokesman is Tom. This was published in 1977 by Stuart HOLROYD, who was sometimes part of the sittings, sometimes not, and listened to all the tapes of the years in the 70s. And we are now here at the very beginning. They have not gone on the journey yet. And Phyllis said, Chapter 5, Encounters with the Opposition. Mainly, they wanted me to tell you that what they say will happen, Phyllis said. You mean there's no bullshit, Andrija said. Right, no bullshit, Phyllis said. Some readers may be of contrary opinion, but from any point of view, the correspondences between this post-session report of Phyllis's and the information content of the communication itself must stand out as a phenomenon that challenges explanation. Tom's explanation of how an excess of the positive is as undesirable as an excess of the negative, and of the need to keep the two in balance, is paralleled in Phyllis's imagery of the spinning engine energies. And his point that really there is no good and there is no bad was vividly brought home to Phyllis when she was shown things that to her were very ugly and told that to others they were beautiful. Again, Tom deplores the ignorance and ineptitude of the world's religious leaders, and Phyllis sees the Pope on the carpet. This phenomenon of Phyllis getting visual imagery corresponding to information that Tom expresses conceptually often occurs, and as human brains tend to have a bias towards conceptualization or visualization, it seems highly unlikely that Phyllis herself, at an unconscious level, should be generating both the concepts and the images. According to Tom, she is generating neither, but is channeling the concepts and being shown the imagery. In other words, both concepts and images are emanating from an external source, indeed from an extraterrestrial source. That may be difficult to believe, but it is equally difficult to find a plausible psychological explanation of the phenomenon, even in the light of all that is known about the psychology of the dissociation of personality, for it is a case of two mental functions, of a type that are totally different and usually mutually exclusive, going on at the same time. Though some of Phyllis's out-of-the-body experience reports tend to sound like science fiction scenarios, it seems to me that when, as in this case, they include imagery that parallels and complements the conceptual content of the communication, they must confound psychological explanation and constitute prima facie evidence that the communications as a whole emanate from an external source, which, depending on your point of view and the height of your credulity threshold, might be either a stunning revelation or a pretty obvious point no longer needing evidence. Of course, even if the existence of the external source be considered thus proved, this evidence has nothing for its reliability. But in this perplexing area, you can ask too much of any one piece of evidence. Detective work has to be painstaking, patient, and piecemeal. In addition to holding daily communications while they were together at Ossining during the first 3 weeks of October, John, Andrija and Phyllis each had several sessions or treatments on Andrija's electronic equipment mentioned previously. The basis of this was an invention that Andrija had made many years before for the treatment of nerve deafness. John, by chance, had just this condition caused by the noise of racing car engines, and the device's unexpected side effect, the improvement of memory, might be of use for Phyllis. So Andrija had asked about this in a communication. Tom gave him to believe that it was not a matter of chance that he had invented it, and that with some modifications and with Ultima funneling energy at the time, it was in use. It was in use. Great things could be expected of it in a different area. Under these circumstances, it might not improve John's deafness, but it could cure Phyllis' memory problem. And it would also enhance awareness in all of them, serve as a means whereby they might each individually receive communications from the management, so that they would be able to validate the information received by cross-checking and facilitate the process of imprinting magnetic tape with information directly. Tom gave instructions as to how recording equipment could be incorporated in the system, and said that between 23 and 28 consecutive daily treatments for each of them should complete the process and make direct communication and imprinting possible. As it turned out, none of them was able to complete the prescribed number of treatments without a break, so they didn't find out whether all the marvels that Tom anticipated from the use of the device would occur if his instructions were followed. There's a lot in the communications of this period about electrical energy and devices. On the 6th of October, they held a communication in the evening in the normal way, but when they played back the tape, it was blank. They were sure that they had not made a mistake in the recording procedure, so at the beginning of the next day's session, Andrija asked for an explanation. Tom had one. The communication we gave you was of vital importance because of some of the knowledge that was released. At the end of the communication, those that oppose were attempting to transpose on your tape, and the transposition would have led you to believe that it was coming from us, and it was not. So in order to prevent confusion and misunderstanding on playback, the tape had been erased. The opposition would have less chance of getting up to such mischief, Tom indicated, if the communication sessions could be held under conditions of electromagnetic shielding. The day after he made this suggestion, Andrija received a call from a company that was going bankrupt and wished to dispose of cheaply and quickly an unusual piece of equipment, namely a Faraday cage. He made arrangements to go and see the equipment in New York, and in the course of the next session with Tom mentioned that, fortunately, he would be able to get a Faraday cage for them to work in the near future. Things are not fortunate, Tom said. The synchronistic happenings of this kind, and many such have occurred in the course of the work, that have convinced the group that they are not just spinning the entire web out of their own heads. The conversation that followed is worth reporting, for it gets back to one of the recurrent themes of this period, and one of the basic and more difficult themes of the communications as a whole. Andrija chuckled at the thought that the opportune offer of the Faraday cage was not just chance coincidence. There was just a suggestion of admonition in Tom's "things are not fortunate," as if to say Andrija should have known this. Well, you have to remember that we're stuck in bodies on the physical plane, Andrija said, so we haven't got the lofty perspective that you have. You have because you are one of us, or you would not be where you are, Tom said. Yes, I understand that we are one of you, Andrija conceded, but I think we are like one of you who has chosen to come into Earth and take on the body of an ant, with all its limitations, and therefore what one thinks, feels, and does has all the limitations of the ant. Is that not true? This is true, and all of us have decided that if such a situation arose again, if a planet should fall out of caliber again, rather than permitting a few of our people to return to help that planet, all of us would return in order to understand. But it is not possible now, for there is no longer enough time. So then we came with a total memory wipeout and just acted and lived like people on Earth. Right? Andrija asked. The reason for the memory wipeout is because of the atmosphere in which we live. And I can understand that if we had had the slightest inkling of who we were, we couldn't have tolerated the situation, Andrija said, but Tom didn't agree. This is not necessarily so. Because you are who you are, you can tolerate anything. You've had glimpses in your consciousness of who you are. Yes, but those seem like wild imaginings, as you can surely conceive. Have you yourself ever been on this planet, Tom? Yes, but you must remember that in my time there was not the confusion that there is now, and there was not the density that there is now, and I do not mean gravitational density, but density of pollution and radiation, which also affects the physical body and the mind. Yes, that is a very serious problem, Andrija said. Is there anything that can be done in the next few years? The reason for us will be one, Tom said. Then after a pause, they say I'm talking in riddles. Yes, that was a bit of a riddle, Andrija agreed. One of the reasons for the arrival of the civilizations that will help this planet is because of this problem, Tom explained, getting it clearer this time. In a number of communications over this period, Tom set out to make good their memory wipeout by giving them details about their earliest associations with the planet Earth. The purpose was ostensibly to make them more clearly understand their roles in the present mission, and Tom repeatedly insists that the information is not given in order to flatter their egos. You were among the first arrivals of us, and that was over 34,000 years ago, Andrija was told. You were one of the founders of the first civilization. Your story of Adam and Eve was from this time. And where would that have been on Earth? He asked. In Aksu. Andrija remembered the name. It was still on modern maps. They had come across it when they had checked the coordinates that Tom had given in his first communication at Count Pino, Turola's house in March. Oh, that's the place? Ah, that's the place in the Tarim Basin, he said. That is right. And I gather that civilization didn't succeed. It was not your fault. It was too soon. It was a high civilization, but not adapted. Can you tell us what elements of civilization we tried to give at that time? Andrija asked. What was it we were concerned with? Was it agriculture, medicine, astronomy, or what? It was language. It was to raise the beings from the level of mere animal. It was a way to communicate. A sophisticated idea this, that language is not so much the product of the basis of civilization, the prerequisite of any evolutionary leap, as it's stated in St. John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word. Andrija asked if the language had survived, and Tom said that it had, but not down to the present age. When the first civilization had failed, not all had been lost, for groups of people from it had moved into 3 other parts of the world, where civilizations had in due course developed, but these in turn were eventually eclipsed. Andrija further learned that he had spent 1,600 years on Earth at that time, and during this period he helped give the civilization of Aksu not only language, but also knowledge of building, agriculture, and healing. John had been incarnated as his son, and had kept up the good work after his departure for a further 2,000 and some years. Then, 600 years after John's first earthly stint, some natural disaster had brought the civilization of Aksu to an end. On a later mission to Earth, John and Andrija had been joined by Phyllis, who had been involved with the civilization of Ur, or summer. They had also all three worked together in Egypt, Tom said, in the time of 5,000 to 6,000. If we take this to mean between 5 and 6,000 years ago, he's talking about the 4th millennium BC, when, according to the Egyptologist J. Viau, the earliest representation of the Egyptian deities appeared. Andrija and John were fascinated by this information and wanted Tom to tell them more, but he declined to do so at the present time because, he said, there were problems. Opposition forces were building up, and if the information about their heritage were known, the opposition would become angrier and more dangerous. He too would be glad when the 22nd of the month came, for after that the opposition's power would be much diminished, and they would not be capable of mounting a sustained attack. So he would resume the record of their earlier lives at a later date. I wonder how many readers the last 2 pages have lost us. Even thinking of Andrija, John and Phyllis not as personalities, but in a specific space and time, but as key fields, does not help put down the suspicion that all this previous life stuff is one monumental ego trip. Though it is difficult to know whose ego trip it is, since they are all credited with important historical roles. I envisage 2 types of reader who might have stayed with this narrative so far: those who are interested in the message and those who are intrigued by the mystery. It is primarily to the latter that the following remarks are addressed. Tom divulged more information about previous lives in the course of the following month. If we asked what kind of information it is and where it comes from, and discount for the present the possibility that it is literally true and comes from an extraterrestrial intelligence, its consistency has to be taken into account in any answer we propose. The way that the information comes out also has to be taken into account. It is not given en bloc at one time, but it is elicited in bits over a long period of time, sometimes by Andrija or John asking questions, and sometimes by Tom volunteering information when the discussion takes an appropriate turn. If somebody were making up the entire background as they went along, the problem of maintaining consistency with the increasing complexity would soon become more and more formidable, and we would surely expect to find some anomalies cropping up in the later stages. If, on the other hand, it is not a case of the picture being gradually built, then presumably the information exists in total somewhere at all times, and bits of it becomes available from time to time. But then the question is, where does it exist? In the conscious or unconscious mind of a particular individual? In a disembodied mind or T-field? Whose mind? What T-field? The reader intrigued by mysteries will be greatly exercised by these questions as the full story unfolds. Though Tom was unable to say more about their previous lives at this time, on the 12th of October, he had a great deal to say about their present lives, emphasizing that it was important for their work that the trio, both individually and as a group, should be well integrated and balanced. He said, "There are aspects of your personality that perhaps each of you do not recognize within yourself. We could tell you those aspects, but would you believe at this time?" Andrija said he was sure they were all honest enough to acknowledge their weaknesses, and it would help if Tom would pinpoint the important ones. John agreed, saying it would be very valuable to have specific problem areas that they should work on pointed out to them. Tom said he would have to consult, and after a brief absence returned to report. They tell me it is important that you should understand that we are not criticizing. Oh yes, Andrija says, we understand that you are just trying to make sure the project doesn't fail. But there was more to it than that. Remember, besides the project, a world that will exist after the landing. Do you understand that every aspect of your personality must be balanced for the work after? To help them effect the balance, Tom now delivered a little speech, addressed to each of them in turn, stressing different points than the ones he had brought up in a similar session the previous month. As before, Tom was the first to be put under scrutiny. Sir John, can you learn not to run from the world? Can you learn to be involved and not hurt? Can your frustrations be tempered? Can your frustrations be channeled and the energy used? Can your guilt be removed? John said he didn't understand the first statement about his running away from the world, and Tom explained. Remember that in the future it will be important for you to deal with the world. It is difficult for you to deal with the world. Can you remove your guilt? Can you love yourself? Can you not voice your needs? Remember, you are the balance, but also remember that you need those to balance you. To Andrija, Tom said, it has been your need to share your work and to share your love, and that has created problems in your marriages. Is it possible in your life to have a separate life and not involve the work? It is easier the other way, but let us explain to you your own insecurities. You do not face your insecurities. You think that as a fellow human of all the fellow humans of the human race, there is an element missing in you. Maybe say that as a human, which you are in your physical body, you have no need to have insecurities. You are complete. But in the vibration of your human life, you have a need to prove yourself and a need to involve those in your personal life, in your work. Because your insecurity tells you that only through your work will they be with you. And that is not true. Andrija admitted that this was pertinent comment, and Tom went on to speak about Phyllis. She had over the past weeks largely overcome her problem of doubt and disbelief. But there was still the problem of ego. In this being's vibration, because of your past history in this life, there is the necessity to be in front, the necessity to be in motion, the necessity to be completely independent, and that is ego. Can this being now be passive? Can she remove herself from the need to be in the center with people and to have people? Can she remove herself completely and be placed in an area of no contact? Andrija asked for clarification of the last phrase, and Tom said, she is now in an area of no contact. If you understand this being's human life, you will understand of what we speak. Andrija said he assumed what was meant was no contact with friends, relatives, and loved ones, and Tom had to correct him. We mean no contact with many people and with the public, which clarified the apparent ambiguity of maintaining that she needed to be independent, and at the same time needed to have people. For if the term people was understood to mean the public, the two needs were not inconsistent. From an evidential point of view, passages like this, of which there are several in the communications, are particularly interesting, for they do suggest that some intelligent independent of the trio under scrutiny is commenting from an objective viewpoint. Whatever the trio may have been in previous existences of elsewhere in the universe, they are now human beings with the human limitations. And Tom has superior insight and knowledge, and so can function as a kind of guru figure to them. He frequently does, and is never at a loss for an answer, even when he is called on to produce one spontaneously to the most abstruse questions. What is enlightenment was one that John brought up during one of the few sessions I have personally attended. Following the above quoted psychoanalytic session, there occurred in the same communication a discussion very reminiscent of the guru-disciple situation, which is worth quoting because of the general interest of the questions raised. We don't quite understand the way you use the term soul and spirit, Andrija said. I wonder if you could clarify what the distinction is. There are actually three, Tom said, mind, soul, and spirit. And when they blend completely, then you are pure energy, which is pure soul. And what is spirit, as distinguished from the other two? Andrija asked. Spirit is the soul in the physical world, or a soul that manifests in the atmosphere of your physical world. It is a vehicle. Does it have any relation to the astral body? Yes, it is the astral. And what about mind? Is it connected with the brain, with the spirit, or with the soul? The mind is connected with the soul, and the etheric body is the soul cover. Andrija recapitulated. So these are distinct functions of the human personality. The mind related to the soul, the spirit related to the body, and the soul, of course, independent. It is not in a body, but it is connected with a body when it is connected with the etheric. This is right, Tom confirmed. Well, that's very important because world literature is in total confusion about these things, Andrija said. While they were onto definitions, Tom asked about humor. Most of our humor, he said, is based on our physical existence. So I wonder if you understand our humor and if you have humor in your world. We have cosmic humor. God could not have survived without being able to laugh at himself. What happens in the universe when God laughs? Andrija said. Does everything shake? Everything shines, answered Tom. And I make here a break. Have a good Thursday.